Yo, welcome to another edition of the Geeky Bros podcast. I'm your boy Tactix, and I know I have to turn my mic down. I heard that feedback. My bad. But anyway, go ahead, Darcy.
Best introduction yet. And I was like preparing for one, and you just like did that. It's your boy Darcy, and I'm sad that Logic has retired. Going on to Umar now.
What?
And this is
I'm
Big
sorry.
Geek Umar. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what Logic is aside from Vulcan aspect of it.
Logic is a rapper who's put out like 14 projects over the years, and he's just like decided he's retiring. It's I'm wearing this shirt, and I just saw myself in my own webcam. I was like, I had to say something. So
I'm not gonna lie. I totally thought it was some sort of like Toronto like brand that like their store just like they just like shut down due to COVID, and I'm like, oh no, poor Logic. And then you're like, oh, is he retired? I'm like, ah.
I mean, poor him that he's done with that part of his career, but I mean, he's working with J.J. Abrams on film, so I'm like, he's not struggling. But that's for another podcast. Anyways, Umar, introduce yourself.
I'm Big Geek Umar. I think I already did that, but nonetheless, we're kind of off today in terms of intros, but here we are.
Welcome to Professionalism 101. Let's go, guys.
All right, Umar, what's on the agenda for today?
I think you're a little quieter now, too quiet now. But
really? Huh? Is that better?
It's sultrier.
Yeah, just like Barry White. Yeah, I like it. What was in my coffee today, man? Oh, really?
Is it a podcast with just three homies hanging out? It is both.
Yes.
Yeah.
So on the agenda today is we're going to be talking about controversies in Hollywood. Specifically, we're going to be starting with Joss Whedon. Now, do you guys both know who Joss Whedon is?
No idea.
No clue.
Darcy, whenever you say that, I know you're just lying. So
I was just laughing because he followed up with the same thing.
So for those in the audience who don't know, Joss Whedon is the director of, the most recent body of work that we know him from is that he's the director of Justice League.
Boo. He just spit.
We all the way off the rails today, right?
We are. I feel like we all had sugar or something.
Oh, I'm just running on no sleep right now. That's all I got.
That's fair. But also, Joss Whedon is known for several other very big things.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
the sequel series, Angel, and then also Firefly, and he directed Avengers 1 and Avengers 2.
And Cabin in the Woods, Umar's favorite horror film.
Actually, that's totally true. I actually I hate horror, and I'm a big fan of Cabin in the Woods because that was more of a comedy than anything else.
I really enjoyed that film. That surprised me so much.
Yeah.
Anyways,
so, the big controversy with Joss Whedon, who was, I would say, for me, much beloved, and by many people, much beloved. He kind of, I would say, the first thing that happened to him was, I think last year or something like that. His wife kind of went on record and said that he's been cheating on her for their entire marriage, all through Buffy, all through Angel, all through Firefly, and then so on and so forth. So everyone was like, "Oh, well, that's a guy who kind of cornerstoned the feminist TV series is all of a sudden found out to be a really shitty husband." So that was kind of disheartening, but didn't really take away from Joss's, he apologized. He said, I'm a weak human being, but I still believe in all the feminist stuff. It's just that, it wasn't like I was abusing anyone, or it just was that I just was unfaithful. But then things started going south really fast this year, as I think it was Ray Wise is his name, a cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Cyborg was kind of the one who started this, where he basically
correction, Ray Fisher.
Sorry, I think Ray Wise is an older actor. Anyway, Ray Fisher kind of went on record to say that while filming the reshoots on Justice League, because Joss Whedon was brought in after Zack Snyder had to leave Justice League, I think due to his daughter's suicide, unfortunately. So Joss Whedon came in and kind of like finished the movie, and we all know how that turned out. But apparently, everyone on set loved Zack Snyder. Really, and we discussed this in the previous podcast. They loved his cut of everything. Ray Fisher kind of broke the ice, saying like, Joss Whedon sucks, and that he made like a very unhappy work environment. But that was like as far as he went. But then, as things have been getting out more and more, it sounds like the rest of the cast felt the same way. I think even Aquaman and Wonder Woman have made certain comments along those lines. And then people from Buffy, like some stunt coordinators and the big star Spike on Buffy, they kind of had some similarly interesting things to say about Joss. So Joss is his credibility is really nosediving fast, and he actually was uninvited to online Comic-Con. I think it was for LA or something like that. So yeah, Joss he's not having a good time, and there's a lot of controversy. So that's kind of what the first topic is going to be about. Like, how much of this stuff do you guys both know?
One, before we jump into it, I just want to call out, because you made me Google it, who Ray Wise was.
Yeah.
And he did voice acting for Joker in The Killing Joke. Just calling out how the irony of how we're talking about one thing related to DC and you called out a name from somebody else, not even knowing it.
I thought The Killing Joke had Mark Hamill for Joker.
Oh, wait. He was somehow related in the movie. I don't know. I just saw it popped up as a big picture of the Joker. Oh, yeah. Just ignore my. See, I told you, 4 hours of sleep, man. 4 hours of sleep. He's somehow related to the film. I'm gonna figure out what it is by the end of
this. So while Darcy is Googling, T, have you? What's your experience with Joss Whedon and his work?
I'm gonna be frank. I don't give a fuck. People. This is the problem with people. Like, they put celebrities on too high of a pedestal, and then when shit like this happens, they're all surprised and shocked, like, oh my god, this person's a terrible person. Who the fuck cares? They're all like, Joss Whedon eats and shits like everyone else. I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't checking for, like, I wasn't like all that invested in him as a person. I liked some of his films. I love the Buffy series. I love the Angel series. I love Avengers. Avengers 2 was okay. But in terms of his personal life, like, it's whatever to me, man. Like, I don't view celebrities in that same limelight as everyone else, where they put people on a pedestal and then like they're all shocked when they actually have like personal lives or like fucked up personalities or whatever the case may be. It's the same shit that's going on with like Ellen DeGeneres. Apparently, like, there's a lot of backlash going on with her and like how she's like actually a terrible person. But obviously people are going to be nice, but like, in front of the camera, but like, it's the same thing with like Instagram. What we're seeing, like, we always see these highlight reels of people looking all glamorous and all dolled up and shit, and then you meet them in real life and you're like, oh yeah, you don't really look like that. What filter are you using, bro? So honestly, I don't really care all that much. I mean, it's unfortunate that he as a person made it very hard for the actors to feel safe and comfortable in their work environment, because how long were they shooting Justice League for? Like several months kind of thing. Yeah. And then on top of that, not to mention that they started off with a really dope director that they all vibed with. And then you bring in this next guy, Joss Whedon, who, we all assume it's going to be like fun and exciting because we're so much of, like, we're fans of his work, his body of work, but then, behind closed doors, he's actually an asshole. Right. And so for me, it's gotten to the point where it's just like, I don't like, when I hear news like this, I'm not surprised or taken back at all. The only person I would actually be surprised and actually be like, oh shit, man, like, really?
Tom Hanks.
Okay, yeah. So there's two. So Tom Hanks, and Keanu Reeves, because I hear so much dope shit about that guy. Like, and despite the tragic events that have occurred in his lifetime, and yet he still remained so humble and so nice and so genuine. It's like, if I was to hear that he slapped a chick or some shit like that, or choked someone out, like, Ezra Miller, you know what I mean?
I saw that coming.
Yeah, I had to throw that in there. But yeah, it's like, I'm not. This shit doesn't faze me anymore, because these people are human. Like, they make way more money than I do. That's one difference. They probably eat like luxury every single time, every single night. I eat the same meals over and over again, but that's neither here nor.
They get the premium, like, instant ramen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That premium instant ramen.
You know what I mean? With 2 eggs, yo. So, but yeah, it doesn't faze me anymore. I honestly don't give a fuck, really. I mean, now I'm just excited for Justice League, because now Zack Snyder gets his baby back and he gets to do it the way he envisioned. So that's really all I care about, to be honest.
I find it like, go on, Darcy.
So to reclaim my honor, he played Commissioner Gordon. Okay,
that makes sense.
I'm over here like, I'm so tired. I just screwed myself over. I just made myself look like an idiot.
Never amongst us, brother. Never.
Yeah, except for the fact that it's on the internet. Hey, guys.
But I find it very ironic, actually, because just like you said, Tactix, you were saying that everyone was kind of like sad to see Zack Snyder go, and now they're really excited to see his cut be like shown, and also to it be like the superior version, which is the reason why it's ironic is when filming began and he was taken off, when Zack Snyder was taken off the film and everyone was told that Joss Whedon was coming in, I was just like, oh, thank God, maybe this movie will survive. But like, it's almost like the exact opposite is taking place.
Sorry, you said something. I'm going to say something slightly different, but you threw a random thought in my head by something you were saying. So you're talking about Zack Snyder when he was early on into it. People were sad to see him go, obviously, when he left. But before Justice League came out, and when Batman vs Superman was coming out and all that kind of stuff, people were really hating on like Zack Snyder, right? Because they didn't like the work, right? And in a way, I want to say that like the culture of people is kind of like expecting of him, almost like a studio expects, like, I want this kind of quality product. I want this product to be a certain way. And now we're on the flip side of it, and we're excited to see the creator's vision, regardless of if we like it or not. So it's like at one point, society around music or movie, is kind of expecting like a studio, and now we're kind of like, no, let's celebrate like art for art's sake, even if it's like not perfect. Which is just you said that, and it's like a random.
I completely agree.
Yeah, but you know what? The internet is ruthless and will tear that shit to shreds if it's terrible, man. I'm telling you right now, it's coming regardless. They might be all nice and embracing now, like, oh yeah, we get the Snyder cut. But if it sucks, people are like, what the fuck was this shit, man? So I feel it coming, man.
You're not wrong.
More with you, Ty. In fact, I'm actually fascinated to see what the internet will have in terms of a reaction when it comes to this movie. Because for me, I said it before, I am only happy that the Snyder cut is happening because it's a step in the right direction for us to kind of get more quality comic book movies. Just like when like Deadpool got released on the internet, like the trailer, we were able to like push the studios to kind of give us what we wanted. The same thing with this. Like, I want to see this cut. It doesn't matter to me if it's good or bad. To be honest, I have a high expectation of it going to suck for me.
And a high expectation or a low expectation?
High expectation is going to suck. Like, I would be very surprised if I actually enjoyed this film.
I just want to see the completion of this whole saga, because I feel like with not so much with Man of Steel, but with Batman v Superman and then with Justice League, it felt like a TV series rather than a movie, because they left a lot of stuff like like we didn't get like for example, like the dream sequence. I'm like, well, what the fuck was that about? Or the like Flash show. Well, actually, no, they kind of addressed the Flash showing up in the dream or whatever, but it just felt like there was a lot of stuff that he still left unturned. Like there was a lot of stones that were unturned that weren't really explained all that well. Like even the Robin suit, like that whole Easter egg or whatever. I feel like we were gonna get a story regarding that at some point, and he was just kind of throwing that in there as a teaser, like, oh, this is coming, just you wait. And I don't agree with that style of filmmaking, because that's banking on the intention that, or the expectation that you're actually going to get another movie, and we almost didn't. So it's like, I'd rather you put majority of your storyline into one movie, have it fleshed out, and then you can leave something open-ended for the ending, with there being a possibility of them continuing the story, kind of like with
MCU.
No, just with like, for example, with Batman Begins, that in itself was its own complete film, and the way they ended it with the Joker card, it's like, oh, like that's sick. But you could have left that movie the way it was, because for people who are familiar with the lore, and they're like, oh, if he was to do another movie, Joker would be in the follow-up. But if they never actually did The Dark Knight, that movie could have been a self-contained movie on its own, right?
Exactly.
So I like when they focus on movies individually, but then they give you elements of, okay, there's a potential that we could carry on this storyline, right? They even did the same thing with Dark Knight Rises in a sense, right? So yeah.
Even though like the I want to say standard way of doing it would be to at the end put the hint. I like when movies also put hints in the middle of the film, but they don't do it like a giant plot hole piece, more like an Easter egg that they're dropping little subtle things, but they're not really super important to the story, like something in the background, or they interact with somebody and the name of somebody is like, wait, is that okay? And then you're like, maybe in a second film, but like they build up some pieces, but not so much that it's like, because for me also, it's like, I like it when it's a little bit like unobvious, if that's a word, right? Because it's like, if at the end of the film, if I can anticipate that this exact scene is probably going to happen, and we're going to get this exact like opening for the next film, then it's a little less exciting when it happens, because I'm like, oh, I knew it was coming, right? So
So, but Darcy, now I want to ask you, like, what are your thoughts on the Joss Whedon controversy? Like, how do you feel about it? So
I have a couple of different feelings. I'm going to throw one thing out here. So one, like, as somebody who like manages people in like my day job, right? Like, I get it really bothers me to keep constantly hearing about such poor leaders, right? Because like, one, it's a testament sometimes to like how good actors are. If their work circumstances are as bad as is described, or they are as bad as is described, right? But like, and yet to produce quality work, right? Like, there are films that we love that we've found out that are like completely horrible experiences. Can you like imagine doing whatever job it is that you do, and you have bosses like
James Cameron?
Yeah, like saying like being like completely rude or over the line. Like, I understand there's a level of like, in certain circumstances, being difficult towards a vision in almost any job and career. But there's a level of like, you're just constantly well over the line, and it's just it's super frustrating, like, just to hear it all the time. I agree with Tactix, though. I don't like put a lot of these people on pedestals. I mean, there's some people that you'd be hurt to hear about, but in general, I'm like, I'm not so much affected that the person. I'm more just affected that, like, one, I'm upset that the people have to go through it. And two, that's also, now this is the selfish side. So the first one was like, trying to show like where I feel empathy for other people. But the other one, on the selfish side of things, is that, well, we aren't getting as good of quality of work as we could get. If the movie is X good, like, let's say Avengers was a horrible experience. We find out, like, Chris Evans, all of them are like, yeah, he was horrible to make Avengers with. But Avengers is that good. Could we have had even a better Avengers? Seriously though, like, right? Like, I'm not saying like it could be better, but if the experience is better, could they have done more things with their acting, because they weren't worrying about, Scarlett, like Johansson over here isn't worrying about Joss Whedon acting a certain way, right? Which is distracting her from doing what she came there to do in the first place. you know? Right? Like things are playing on people's emotions. Like, yeah, maybe they used it and, you know, they're amazing for taking the negative and flipping it. But like, what could have happened with so many pieces of art that people were excited to do, and then they get in there and their boss is a complete a-hole?
Yeah. I would say that. Go on.
Are there any reports of anybody on the Avengers or like anyone in that movie? Is there any reports of them complaining about Joss at all, or
not that I know of?
So do you think it was more he was being a dick to, like, he's got conditions, like, so if a person that he's working with is of higher status, like has stronger star power, because like when you're working with people like Robert Downey Jr., what's his fucking name? Chris Evans. I was about to say Steve Evans. Chris Evans, and like, you know, Samuel, like all these guys are like have been heavy in the game for a long, long time. You know what I mean? So
I don't think it's that though, because the way Ray stated it, and I haven't read anything since like a few days ago, is that he's like basically he's saying that Joss doesn't want for the way things like went down on set to be heard, and if he's like saying like if I'm lying in any way, he's basically told Joss to sue him for libel, which means that he is like, and he's also, because he's like, I don't have a career to lose, like Ben Affleck has a career to lose, and relationships and stuff like that. But that means he's super confident in that what he's saying isn't like, well, he has a really strict writer and he's just difficult and like he's a bit of a diva. Like he's saying like there's something to that. Like it feels like, you know, when like it's going to come out and you're going to find out like he's a whole lot of horrible things and did a whole lot of stuff, that he's putting that much of a statement on the line. Right?
What do you mean Joss didn't want to be heard though?
So from what it sounds, even for people from all the way back in Buffy, like from the two stunt fighters and coordinators, and also from Spike, James Marsters, the actor, it sounds like he is more of a megalomaniac. Like it's all about him. And if anyone tries to either outshine him or kind of like tell him no, or say like, you know, I know better, he shuts them down. So James Marster surprisingly was somewhat defensive of Joss Whedon, even though he was the one saying that, hey, this happened. Like one of their altercations, I think this was like early on when James was made like a regular cast member, and like everyone was like, oh, Spike is our favorite. Apparently Joss like pinned James Marsters against the wall and was like, hey, you're not the star here. You're not bigger than me. If you think you're bigger than me, I can end your career with a phone call, and kind of like walked away. And I was just like, And James Marsters was like, hey man, like, you know, things were going on over there. Maybe like, you know, maybe it was my fault a little bit too. Like I was like, you know, it just was one of those things. But I was kind of like that. And the stunt coordinators were saying something similar, like the fact that like he kind of just like fired them, or like he got rid of them. I can't remember actually what they said, but yeah. So like it's kind of like what they all were saying is that he has a massive ego.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going to assume that by the time Justice League rolled around, right, things weren't going so well. Like I'm assuming with his like personal life. And then I would say like any director coming in to help facilitate the Zack Snyder situation isn't a bad situation, right? Zack Snyder was already like, you know, I'm sure he was fighting the fight with the executives at WB, that the ones that they used to have, that were basically like, change this film to be something other than what you shot it to be. And he's probably trying to fight to keep the vision alive at the time. And then now if someone's going to come in and take over, and essentially they're coming into these bosses, and these bosses are going to be like, change it. And you're going to be like, you just pay me a whole lot of money. And like, you're not going to want to fight that fight. If you're like just a good director who does a good job, treats your staff well, right, then that would be a difficult situation to try to like please the executives and keep Zack Snyder visions alive, and try not to put too much of your own touch on it and keep all alive. If that was your goal, that would be a hard situation. So if you come in and you're like a megalomaniac who wants to make it all about you, and have these executives paying a lot of money, and his personal life was like a certain point I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that like your example of Buffy looks like, you know, a child's play compared to what was going on during Justice League.
Yeah.
And Ray is basically like whistleblowing on this, and it's gonna like when it comes to light, it's gonna be worse than we think it is.
Also, like just looking retroactively, and this will lead into my next question. Joss has always been someone that when he doesn't jive with the studios, it is very apparent. Like, look at Avengers 2. That was him not getting along with the Marvel Studios. They wanted stuff done. He wanted stuff done. That's what resulted in that movie being the way it was. Firefly, he fought tooth and nail to keep that series. It got canceled, and then immediately afterwards, Buffy and Angel, like the story writing just went downhill after that. And like even the ending of Angel is proof that Justice didn't care anymore. Like he was killing people left, right, and center, and all that sort of stuff. And people were like, "What's happening here?" So I would say that Joss never does well with people. Like I always assumed that the studios were being like. Let me give my point of view on this. Like I was one of those people who put Joss on a pedestal. Like I thought he could direct a whole shitload of stuff. I thought he was really funny and really cool. The fact that he was so progressive and like kind of like one of those like pioneer heroes for like the progressive inclusion and also that sort of stuff. So finding out that like, you know, it sucked to hear that he was cheating on his wife the entire time, but at least he wasn't like, at the time I was like, oh, thank God he wasn't Me Too or like anything like that. I was like, oh, okay, so he just had an affair. But then it's like, oh, so he also had an affair and a megalomaniac, and also he made a really unhappy work environment for a bunch of people. So it's like, for me, it's kind of disheartening. But at the same time, I do definitely take what both of you are saying. Like, these are like actors and directors. Like, who knows what they're like?
It sounds like if he has such a big ego that when he ends up in a situation where he's happy and everything's kind of appeasing his ego, then the creative juices flow and things happen, even though he's probably still addicted to some people. And then, once his ego's bruised, it's like everything's just going to go haywire. So I would assume by the time Justice League rolled around, his ego was bruised, because that's not you have to have a tough skin to walk into that situation, right? In general, to be sitting between two polar opposite goals. One is like, make this movie like Marvel, and the other one's like, this already has a vision, right? like just sit in the middle of that problem. No matter who you are, it's just like, that's a hard problem. It's not an easy problem.
So that leads me to ask you both a question. Now, given the fact that we are aware of what kind of a person Joss Whedon is like, and also like what the behind the scenes situation was for all these different sets, does this controversy affect his body of work for you guys? Like retroactively?
I have a question, which is like, it's circling my head and I don't know how to think about it, which is like, is the feminist progressiveness authentic or not? Right? And it's hard to say without knowing the stuff behind the scenes, right?
That's a really good question.
It's like, is he truly somebody who believes in all like the feminist stuff, or was it like, you always worry that some of these things, or
was like, he like or are you asking like, was he like tapping a market that hadn't been
that's what I was trying to get to it, right? It's like, at the time, was it like tapping into a market? I mean, Buffy at that time would be probably a pretty early time to be tapping into that market, because it wasn't as popular as it is now. Like, it's not as obvious to an executive being like, tapping into feminism like in 2020 is like, an obvious like number one, you should be having feminism, feminist views in your stuff, right? Like equality, basically. Back in that time frame,
I think Buffy came out in like 96.
Yeah, it's just saying in comparison, it's an earlier time, right? Where that stuff was still like an earlier conversation. I don't know. I'm not gonna say how early in the conversation it is, but I don't know. It's like, I don't know if it is, because he could still be, true on those beliefs and was trying to push it for all the right reasons. It's just like, if he was an ass to a bunch of women and did anything that kind of basically starts to say like, you're not being equal and fair to women in the way he interacts, but then it's pushing that, what does that tell you? Like, what does that mean?
How about you, T?
Well, I don't think it doesn't sound like he was being unfair to just women. I think he was just being unfair in general to everyone, right?
Yeah.
So
Fair.
For me, does it affect his body of work? It's tough for me to answer that because he's not the face of his work.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I think it would be different if we were looking at like an actual actor or an actress who it was revealed that they were disrespectful or racist, or there was some kind of issue that resulted in excuse me, resulted in some kind of media coverage where kind of like again with the Ezra Miller thing, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, how do we, with all that shit that's going on, like how do we view that situation now? We clearly see that this guy choked out some chick, right? So
yeah,
you know what I mean? And now it's like, do I really want to see him as the Flash? Not really. I mean, it kind of paints him in a bad light now. So but with Joss Whedon, yeah, he cheated. That's kind of jacked up. It's come out that he's been a little disrespectful to the castmates. That's also kind of shitty. But I personally don't think it really affects, from my own personal standpoint, I don't think it really affects his body of work. I can still separate the artist and the art, right? You can't, with that being said, you can't do that with all things, right? Like I can never listen to an R. Kelly track ever again in my life.
Agreed.
Like,
yeah.
I don't care how much, I do believe that some people deserve redemption, but then there's some guys or girls that just, they don't really get a pass in that regard. So it really depends on the situation. And for this isolated incident, I think, or this situation itself, I can definitely separate the artist from the art.
Yeah.
Darcy?
I kind of think that like when there's a couple of factors that kind of play in here. Like one, Tactix is right. When someone is the face of something, then it's going to be way harder to separate it, right? But when it's a behind the scenes person, a producer, a director, I feel like it depends on how much, for one, personally to the person, how much the director is associated, right? Like if a lot of people don't know who directors are, right? Yeah. But like someone like yourself, Umar, who's like, you have a lot of probably a certain affinity between Joss Whedon and like Buffy and stuff like that, then it might be more difficult for someone in your position because you're thinking about it. But I also feel like if there's a lot of good quality of work that came out from that show, from the actors, you might just kind of separate it enough to be like, you know what, I want to watch this for the actors, right? I actually had a family member hit me up and they're talking about watching the Cosby Show, and I was like, yeah, it's hard to watch these days because of Cosby. But the person was like, yo, like the thing I really love about the show though is everybody else is so good that they were kind of watching it, ignoring him, right? And for me, I think the only thing that's kind of like affected me at one time or another was like, I can't remember which one it was, but I was watching something and something entered my head about Harvey Weinstein with like a film, and I was like, it just made me feel different about it. It's like, man, like, what did this actress have to go through?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the stuff that like I feel like when it comes with the people behind the scenes, the one benefit that we kind of get is the ability to like we might start feeling really empathetically bad for the people, what they went through, but because we don't have to see the person who hurt them, we get the benefit of still being able to appreciate their work and like kind of celebrate the coming through the struggle to still be able to put it out there, because they still put the work out and they still did the work, and I feel like that person wants to be celebrated for their work even if it's difficult, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
For me, I would say that like this does kind of paint my, like, I enjoy rewatching Buffy, Angel, and Firefly, and Joss, like with Firefly, Joss wrote and directed a lot of episodes. With Buffy, the first couple of seasons, he did the same thing. Angel as well. So he wrote and directed a lot of stuff that I really love. And he also did Avengers, the first one that you guys know, it's within my top 5. So this one, I very much agree with what you said, Tactix. Like, I think I will be able to kind of, I agree. The adultery and the hostile or unhealthy work environment situation. None of these things are good. None of these things should be tolerated either. But it's weird to say that we have seen such flagrantly worse situations. Like you guys brought up Harvey Weinstein, like I think that, and Bill Cosby and R. Kelly. These are like the extreme worst case scenarios. He kind of just seems like an everyday asshole in comparison to that. Again, I'm not saying, and even Ellen's kind of going through the same thing. Like she creates an unhealthy work environment for people, and is like
creates or allows. I'm not sure which one it is to determine yet, but regardless, complicity or complacency.
No, you're right. Complicity or complacent. She's complacent with the situation. Anyway, so this kind of leads to a good question then. What are your guys' view on cancel culture, and how do you reconcile it with progressive inclusion?
There's a thing you were just saying a second ago, though, and I want to like hit on it, and it goes into like the cancel culture. So like people tend to do this in multiple things, and when I say this, you'll hear it in multiple different types of conversations. But they'll be like, so this stuff that Harvey Weinstein is bad, and luckily, like this stuff that Joss Whedon's doing isn't as bad. People make that comparison thing a lot, but I feel like there has to be a level of when we set like what the standards are of like what's acceptable. It's like a threshold. Like once you go past this threshold and start getting close to it, that's the problem. Because like I always like to say like like people, let's say you're talking about like something with related to like race, and people be like, well, it's not as bad as this other thing over here. And I'm like, hey, if the knife is 1 inch in or 6 inches in, the knife's still in. Right? Yeah. Like don't be out here pressing a knife against my sin saying, hey, it's not as bad as the guy who stabbed you all the way. It's like, why are you threatening me with it? Right. Yeah. No, but in terms of this cancel culture,
what is cancel culture? Like, I want to know, do we have like a specific definition?
Yeah, I Googled it. So
good.
We have a cancel culture from the official source, dictionary.com. Cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for or canceling public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming.
Okay, so it's not like saying, oh, we stop reading or watching or listening to a body of work. It's more like you said artist.
The first part is the practice of withdrawing support for public figures and companies based on something they do. So withdrawing support would be like not watching a show would be withdrawing support, which has a negative financial impact.
Okay. Yeah, I find it very difficult for me to say I'm for cancel culture or I'm against cancel culture. I think I'm like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Like R. Kelly is an example of I will cancel culture that guy.
The thing that I dislike about cancel culture is mob mentality. It's the same thing as like, I'm going to use like Vancouver as a random example, right? Like we won the Stanley Cup one year, and then a riot started, right? In the streets, and it's mob mentality, right? Like, whereas certain people start something, and then other people just kind of join it blindly, and then it turns into a whole thing. I have no problem with like say canceling R. Kelly. What I have a problem is with it when people are starting to see an issue, whether it's large or small, and then a lot of the people want to quickly jump into it and cancel something before even the information's fully out there, right? Like let's say something is very hearsay and it doesn't really have hardly anything of like any validity.
Well, and the Joss Whedon thing is almost entirely hearsay.
Yeah, fair.
Consistent hearsay, but nonetheless, it's all hearsay.
Yeah, and so then if a bunch of people jump on a particular action to try and directly affect him, right? Like, stop watching event or stop doing this, stop doing that, right? And then it grows into this giant snowball effect where like there's a lot of people. The mob mentality part of that bothers me because it can lack the logic to actually look at the situation objectively and then figure out like what's going on. people just like jump really quickly sometimes to certain things.
How about you, Tactix?
I'm not really for the cancel culture, to be honest. Like, or actually, I don't want to go as far as saying that. I'm more on the fence, like you, Umar. But my problem with cancel culture is similar to Darcy. But the thing with this whole cancel culture thing, or just like any kind of movement, most movements anyway, is that it starts off as a good idea and then it gets blown out of proportion and gets taken out of. It basically goes out of control. I think the cancel culture was good, but then kind of like what Darcy was saying is people jump on it and they just want to be a part of something without actually doing the research as to why we're canceling a particular thing, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of the times it's like, to use Kevin Hart's situation as an example, where he had that homophobic joke from like years ago, right? Yeah. And then people were just quick to jump on him and be like, oh yeah, he's homophobic, let's cancel him. And it's like, I don't agree with that, because he made a public apology. He was sincere about it. This was something that he had said in his younger years as a comedian. And back then, you know, like if you look at comedians from like,
it's a show of the times.
It's right. So it's like, obviously when you're young, it's like you're gonna say a bunch of stupid shit that you probably don't believe in, or you know that your values and your beliefs and stuff like that have changed and evolved over the years. But we all we look at people's past and we kind of put them in this box as like, you know, once a cheater, always a cheater, or once a this, always a this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't give that opportunity for redemption. Mm-hmm. And this is my problem. And it's also, the cancel culture is also can be very dismissive. Like with the Kanye stuff that's going on right now, like a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, Kanye's fucking whacked out of his head, like cancel him kind of shit, right? And this is a personal, this touches me on a personal level, because Kanye is obviously going through some mental shit, right? And as somebody who is a mental health advocate and has dealt with mental like health and all that kind of shit, like I'm very affected by that, because rather than canceling on somebody and be like, oh yeah, we're just going to dismiss this guy. No, that's not the answer. We need to get this person help. He obviously is not in the right state of mind. He's not well. He's been public about his mental health and his struggles and stuff. And, you know, for you to just turn around and be like, oh yeah, just cancel him. It's like, we're so dismissive about that kind of shit. And I think that even, again, using another example, and this might be a bad example, I might get canceled myself for saying this, but I don't really care. The Chris Brown situation, right? Yeah, he fucked up when he the whole beating of Rihanna, like that whole the domestic abuse type of thing, right? I agree. I'm not condoning domestic violence by any means. I think that he needed to be reprimanded for that, and there had to be consequences for that. But I'm on the fence about that situation too, in regards to, again, I'm not supporting the domestic violence. What I'm saying is that people just were so quick to cancel him without getting him the help. Like, obviously there's anger issues there. There's temper issues there. He needs help. He doesn't need to be canceled. I don't think, I mean, you can go as far as be like, I don't know. I don't want to support his music because he's a domestic, all that shit, whatever. Right. But the fact still remains that this dude needs help. And we sometimes need to give these people an opportunity to redeem themselves, to own up to their mistakes, and not make them be held at that standard for the rest of their lives. Because if there is no chance for redemption at any point in time, they're always just going to revert to the same way, because it's like, oh, if you just view me as a monster, then I'm just going to carry on as such. Like, what's the point of me trying to change my life and try to evolve from the person that I was if all you're ever going to see me as is this monster, this person that did this wrong, negative thing kind of thing, right? So
I definitely see that point. I would just say, like, with Chris Brown's situation, like, he doesn't necessarily need to continue his career in the public forum. Like, he did something horrible. He was an extremely abusive individual to his partner, and that hits home to a lot of people who are like abused as well. I don't know full well about that circumstances. I just know like the general person that Chris Brown beat Rihanna.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, I don't think I listened to a lot of his music, so it wasn't that difficult for me to stop listening.
Yeah.
With R. Kelly, I found myself when I actually went through my Spotify list, I found a lot of his songs on there. So I was like, I'm just undo all of that. So kind of going off of what you just described, for me, cancel culture, I am careful when I utilize it. For example, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the author of the Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling, she's definitely created a controversy for herself, and she was also a very progressive figure up until, well, recently. And unlike other people that you've described, Tactix, she doubled down and wrote like an entire manifesto of like what she thought, which was kind of like, okay, so, no one has to do that much research. They just need to read the essay and they will know. So for me, I do not respect her anymore, nor do I agree with anything she had to say about trans people. However, it did leave me to question whether I should cancel culture Harry Potter. And for me, I said no. Because, yes, she is the creator of this body of work. And the body of work meant something progressive to me while I was reading it. And I don't see the need to kind of, like, while she created the body of work, she wasn't the one who gave it to me as an experience. I read it myself. And if I was going to cancel her, I would have to cancel like Shakespeare or like Mark Twain and stuff like that. There are a lot of people who, like, a lot of artists did some really messed up stuff, especially centuries ago.
That we know of too.
Yeah, exactly. For all we know, like one of the best artists of the world could have been like Jack the Ripper, for all we know. So yeah, like I like R. Kelly is someone I definitely cancel cultured because like I felt that I was funding his sex slavery. Chris Brown, I have a very strong view on domestic violence, so like that's on me. I'm not saying that you have a like significantly less view on.
No, I get it.
Yeah, but Bill Cosby definitely has made it impossible for me to rewatch The Cosby Show. But though I do find what you said, Darcy, rather interesting about the fact that everyone else is so good, just to kind of look at them. Like, I love Claire Huxtable. Like, I think she's always fantastic. So yeah, I kind of do cancel culture on a case by case situation. And what you said, Darcy, I do the homework. Or I think it was you, Tactix, who said it.
No, Darcy.
Yeah. So like, I do the homework. I look into it and research it. And Joss Whedon definitely has made me rewatching Buffy and Angel and Firefly something I kind of want to not really do right now. But I don't think I will never rewatch it again.
So the thing, I'm going to circle back on something. So like, cancel culture. And I feel like some people think that this is what it is, but I don't believe it to be this. Some people think, I feel like treat cancel culture like it's a movement. It's not a movement. It's group shaming, right?
Yes.
And the problem is that I'm not trying to compare these things, but like Me Too is a movement.
Yes,
right.
I was actually going to circle to that too.
Me Too is a movement. It's a statement. It stands for something. It has principles. It has visual leaders and stuff like that. Cancel culture, to me, feels much more like, almost kind of biblical. It feels more like people standing and throwing stones, right? And
like a pitchfork sort of thing, like torches and pitchforks.
And it promotes, at its core, a bit of something that's I don't want to go as hard to say it's the word hate, but it's something down that line. And I'm going to quote Avatar because I just finished it. It's
my man.
It's if cancel culture feels like a two-headed viper. While you are killing your enemy, you are poisoning yourself. And yes, that was from Avatar. I really like what Tactix said about oh my gosh, I love what he said. I can't remember the word, redemption, because the thing is like, so for instance, when R. Kelly years ago, the first time we learned about his misgivings,
that he was a pisser.
yeah, right. The thing that upset me right away, and I pretty much almost stopped listening to his music entirely at the time, I listened. There was still some songs that were so good that you still listened to them, and it was hard to deny. But what pissed me off so much, and this is like back in high school, right? So that thing comes out. You're like, oh my god, it's so bad. His first song was Ignition, like remix that I heard, and it was so sexual. And I'm like, how are you? You are not at all like feeling bad about what you did.
Yeah.
If you do something horrible and the first thing you release is like, let's go to the club and let's have sex, baby. It's like,
and then he had the audacity to do another music video where he was wearing a fucking mask. Like the balls on this motherfucker. Like,
right. So the thing that is like the problem with cancel culture that also bothers me is that like people are basically asking for death of people. If it gets so
death of career.
But the thing is what does that promote? Right? So like, I'm not saying that like some of these people should continue having a career. I think the consequences should match the circumstance, right? So like Harvey Weinstein needs to go to prison, right? Like that's a consequence for his actions, which will end his career. Some people will make a mistake, and if they're given an opportunity to redeem themselves and they take that opportunity to redeem themselves, I want to be impressed so much that I'm like, okay, I feel different about you over a period of time. But and I'm not trying to paint that on like one person or another. I'm just saying to like every time people make a mistake, and some mistakes are lesser than others, that you get a lower level mistake and people are like, cancel. Yeah. It's like, what will that create out of the person who makes a lower level mistake? Because this cancel culture isn't like there are rules and it's like, well, only if you do something that is like sexual harassment or like sexual violence, like then we cancel you. No, people are going to start canceling people for like the smallest of things that like, oh, these people disagree with and these other people don't disagree with. But because these people disagree with, let's start a cancel culture to cancel this person out. I've seen it where it's some of the stuff is just ridiculous. It's not to the level of what we're talking about. It's much more minor than this.
I agree. Like for example, Kevin Spacey, though I think he's making a bit of a comeback, very small one. His cancel culture was completely warranted, and I think that was necessary. Like I would say that like it's not like some of these people have done horrible things and should go to prison, just like you said. But for me, if the worst we can do is end their career and stop giving them a platform to like spread the hate, like I agree with Kanye, he needs help 100%. But I also would like him off the public forum and igniting a lot of unnecessary shit.
But that's not the public's job to tell Kanye to get off Twitter. That's his family and friends that love him's job to say you need to come off social right now because it's not helping with your mental like recovery and like what you need to do. Like to have him come off of that is like saying taking somebody who shouldn't go to a bar because they're having like problems with drinking, have friends keep you away from there. Yes, having the bar will keep you out. That's almost a bad analogy, but
yeah, I was gonna say like, if the bar keeps you out, isn't that the same as cancel?
No, but okay, but even if you use like a party as an example where there will be alcohol there, it's the same type of thing.
But like, it's not society's job. Society doesn't own this bar in this analogy, right? It's not society's job to tell Kanye how to deal with his mental health, right? You can put out empathy, but it's not your job to be like, you know what? We need to cancel this man's career because he has a mental health problem. So that's how we solve his mental health problem. That's not how you solve a mental problem.
Yeah.
That's going to exacerbate his problem.
I would say that like, instead of it being like an organized boycott, not even an organized boycott, because that's a movement, like you said, and I support movements like the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter. Some people have equated them to mob mentality, and I would say those are kind of like mob mentality for me. I actually have a soft spot for because in my experiences, mob mentality is about fighting the institution that supports the horrible situations that people are living in. So of course, mob mentality for those things. So cancel culture, I view it as more or less people, and I you know what, I like what you said. Like it's the public demanding people follow their choice of what should happen to this individual, as opposed to how we're doing. Like between the three of us, we probably have each different responses to cancel culture on certain things than the other.
Yeah.
And I like also what you were saying about, because I am cognizant of mistakes, but like the mistakes have to be like with Kevin Hart. I completely agree that was a mistake, and also it was something from a time, like the context matters.
But he's proven his redemption. So like, yeah, they pulled from the
Just
past.
look at Robert Downey Jr., for example. This guy
Not
was
perfect example.
he was in and out of jail. He was a drug dealer. I think he was even stealing some stuff, and he was a complete mess. But this guy turned his life around. He did it for his wife, and then he was given Iron Man, and that like the combination of the two, we love the guy now.
Yeah. So
And Mike Tyson too is another one.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I don't know much about his recovery.
I don't know the details, but it's just interesting how, like, you know, he committed rape is what his history is.
Allegedly.
You're right. I'm not knowing my details.
I tend to believe the victim when it comes to that sort of stuff. So we can leave that part out.
But regardless of the,
I don't know, man. Like okay, we won't get into that, but
yeah. Regardless of the details, it's just interesting that, like, you know, coming back from that kind of a situation. I don't know. For me though, like the thing about cancel culture, and I'm gonna reiterate it. It's like I'm not a biblical person by any means, but it's just like the statement "Thou shalt not throw stones" is the thing that, like, the core concept of what that statement is supposed to mean. This makes me feel like what it says, which is like, it's just a lot of people throwing stones, right? It's like if you see somebody walking down, society says that person's not good, right? And we, you know, like you know, just because they're different. Well, hey, it's time to throw the stones. Oh, you're throwing stones, I'm throwing stones. Let's all throw stones together. And it's like no one's sitting here getting to have any empathy for the person they're throwing stones at a lot of the time. Where it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like it's people we're gonna cancel naturally. I just don't like the trend that is existing. Like,
I would say the cancel culture is more a case by case subjective situation, and that I think that's also more of a personal touch. Like, if you guys were to tell me that I don't know, Tom Hanks, you know, punched a pregnant woman in the face. If that's all I know about the situation, I know, it hurt to even say.
I was just like, the imagination on this guy. Wow. I mean, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. But like, if that's all I heard about the situation, and then I chose to cancel all Tom Hanks movies as a result, boycott all Tom Hanks movies as a result, that's me joining on a bandwagon without really thinking. Like,
or doing research.
Exactly. That's literally you guys are going in a mob, grabbing a pitchfork and like a torch, and I just like, and you're like, hey, you should come with us, and I'll be like, okay, grab a rock, and I follow you guys. I am more wanting to like find out more about a situation, and then I make a decision of whether I want to cancel it or not. Like J.K. Rowling, there is the argument that hey, she gets royalties from like Harry Potter merchandise, so therefore, do I keep buying the Harry Potter merchandise? Like I already have the book. That was like a one-time payment, and I keep it, and I can reread it if I want to or not, and I can separate that. But buying merchandise and having that fund this person who is like anti-trans, is that something I want to do? And to be honest, it's something I struggle with. So yeah, I would say that like how I reconcile is if they've done something progressive for and like have brought people of color and feminism to the forefront and have done it in like a positive way that has garnered like a positive change. To me, I find it does mar my enjoyment of like, or I would say the memories and the nostalgia I have of that moment. Like Buffy and Angel, it's definitely going to have some measure of effect with Joss Whedon, but I don't think I'll stop. Depending on the case, like if it turns out that like Joss Whedon was like sexually harassing people on Buffy, then I'll be like, oh dear God, I can't watch that stuff.
You know, I'm gonna throw another way of thinking of this. I'm gonna take Tactix what he said about the redemption thing. It's like I would want people to get more understanding of like, yes, consequences should be fair, and that we should be thinking about redemption. And if I were to make it a way of arbitrarily putting like math to this. Is like, depending on the crime, the redemption is longer, right? So it's like, oh, you do something small, okay, you know, if in a year I see some positive growth from this person, or
Like the threshold you were talking about before.
yeah, or you find out Kevin Hart, you know, said something like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and you're like, well, we haven't seen from him now, so he has grown, so he's already shown us that redemption, even though we didn't see it, but it actually happened in real time. We can actually see it. And then you look at a Harvey Weinstein, it's like, well, we're gonna need 150 years, so it's gonna take some time before we can feel that redemption come
Same
through.
Martin, yeah,
right. But like the point being is like, to mature enough to say like it is possible for people to come back from things, and that, you know, like I generally have a belief that like I do not like North America's approach towards prisons, right? Like there, a lot of European countries have actual way far better prisons where they live in like condos, they have education, they have like full jobs, and their whole purpose is to put people in there, rehabilitate them, and get them back on the street. They don't want to have people stuck in prison because they want to focus on what it is that broke them in their life before, to fix them, to make them better. And some people you can't fix, so yeah, they're going to stay in prison, but most people are fixable. Most people, it's hard times, right? And in North America, we have too much of like stick people and hold people in, and you're not giving people a chance to redeem. I mean, there's a whole point of actual for profit prisons, which is like they're never going to want to redeem people if your goal is to actually make money off of keeping people stuck inside of a building, right?
People who have like ounces of marijuana are spending like 20 years in prison.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, well, people are like, oh, this person did something that's wrong, so stick them away where I don't have to see them ever again. It's going to make me sleep better at night. Yeah, some people, like crazy serial killers and, you know, like people who just do horrible things.
Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. I was trying not to say it, but like, yeah, some people, yeah, there is almost no chance of redemption, or redemption is going to take their entire life till they die just to even get there, right? Because they're probably too far gone. But most people, you need to have redemption come through, right? Like I want to see
rehabilitation,
but rehabilitation and redemption. Like I want to see that if we find out that, you know, Ellen DeGeneres is actually creating a horrible work environment for her personality, I would love to see her rehabilitate and redeem from that, because she still represents things before this that are really positive, even if some of it's a facade. And I would love to see her one day, you know, come back, you know, work, be like, you know what, I put up a facade with some of these things, and I need to be a better person. And next thing you know, between her, you know, by her 70th birthday, she's like made us all feel very different about her, and we're like, you know, really happy, right? I don't know. I just don't want to see everything to be like, yeah, shit's bad, so just don't give anybody a second chance. And now, it doesn't mean she'll do it, but it's like the people as a whole need a chance to like redeem themselves.
I more just don't want to reward someone while they're still doing bad things.
Yeah, I'm not talking about giving them a reward right away. Redemption requires that they go through like a gauntlet of things and show to like the world over time. I'm not saying that they should keep being in their position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's like if a person in a relationship, like, or a marriage, cheats on their partner, but the partner still decides to stay with that person, then it's a matter of restoring the faith and the trust and building that back up and getting back on the person's good graces, which obviously isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take maybe counseling, some kind of action that showcases that this person is trying to, you know, make amends for the wrongdoing that he did on this person, right? And so that's kind of how I see it in regards to some of these redemptions, right? Where it's like you're giving them a chance or an opportunity for them to redeem those negative qualities that they were possessing all these years, or from whatever the case may be. And like what Darcy was saying, you know, obviously it comes to varying degrees depending on the severity of the quote unquote crime or situation, right? Like if it's, you know, you're drugging chicks at a party and fucking them, like, you know, without their knowledge, then obviously that's going to be very hard to redeem and come back from. But if it's a matter of like cheating or saying something that was overly offensive to a particular group, then
at a particular time, yeah.
at a particular time as well, right? Then that's going to take some work, but at least give them the opportunity to redeem themselves and make amends for those wrongdoings, right? Don't condemn them for the rest of their lives for a mistake that they made in the heat of the moment, or this whatever the situation was at that time. Don't condemn them forever. Like, give them that opportunity to grow and evolve as a person, because we've all said and done shit from our past that we probably wish we hadn't said or done, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to hold any of you guys at fault for any of the shit that you guys did when you were like 12 years old or what the fuck. You know what I mean? So you're not the same person that you were back then. I'm not the same person. Yeah. So give people a chance to grow and evolve, man.
Think of those people who were ex-gangbangers, right? And they killed people and they did a bunch of stuff. And now they're like these advocates, and they go to schools and they go to communities and they try to help kids, right? They've redeemed themselves, and they might, let's say the person was popular at one point at a television show, and then they found out that they were like a big drug dealer, and then they had to do some prison time or something. And then they redeemed themselves and they came back and they started helping out youth, and then they became popular again. They end up back in the same place that they were before in a different way. Mm-hmm. And that ends up being like their path of redemption. It's not to say just stay there, right? It's to say, like, not that we have this mentality right now, I feel like, in society where it's like never ever again when somebody's called canceled, they're done for, like, in every aspect of life, which means that they're going to be, it's like killing them. Because if they can't do anything, I want to see them work anywhere. I wouldn't, like, just the mentality people have is like, I don't want to see them have a job anywhere, do anything. It's like, what are they going to do? Just sit in one spot for the rest of their life? Like,
I would say, like, the difference in that would be that with public figures, you just don't want to see them in the public anymore and reaping these massive paychecks.
Oh yeah, right. I get that, like, as a right away thing, but there's just something in the cancel culture is just, it's too.
No, I agree. Okay. Well, audience, be sure to go in the comment section and let us know what you feel about cancel culture, and also how you reconcile that with progressive inclusion, and also what are your thoughts on the Joss Whedon controversy.
Yo, we got deep, man.
We got
we fully deviated from comic book shit, bro.
Yeah,
we weren't geeky in this one.
No, not at all.
Sometimes you gotta be real with it, right?
That's
and
true.
And then somebody calls and tells you it's time to phone it in, because that was in the background for somebody.
All right, guys. Well, this has been another edition of the Geeky Bros podcast. I am your boy Tactix.
It's your boy Darcy, and peace out, Logic.
And this is Big Geek Umar. Live long and prosper, y'all.